Good evening. As the day's light fades and the world outside grows quiet, we invite you to embark on a tranquil journey through time. Settle in, find a comfortable space, and allow your mind to drift. Tonight, we are turning our attention to one of the most foundational and influential collections of literature in all of human history, the Old Testament. This is not an exploration of faith, but a peaceful, scholarly drift through a vast and profound historical narrative. We will treat these texts as they were originally conceived, as a magnificent tapestry of stories, laws, poems, and prophecies woven over many centuries in the cradle of civilization. The term Old Testament itself is a Christian designation for what Jewish tradition refers to as the Tanakh. This library of books was not written in a single moment, but compiled and edited over 1,000 years, reflecting the experiences and beliefs of a people known as the Israelites. These texts chronicle their origins, their struggles, their triumphs, and their relationship with the divine. From the arid plains of ancient Mesopotamia to the fertile crescent of the Levant, the narrative unfolds across a landscape teeming with rival empires, powerful city-states, and shifting cultural tides. Imagine yourself as a traveler, moving slowly through these ancient lands. We begin our journey in a time beyond memory, a time of cosmic creation, where vast, shimmering oceans give way to solid ground, and the stars are set in their celestial courses. We will then follow the footsteps of nomadic chieftains, listening to their tales around campfires under the vast desert sky. We will feel the heat of the sun on our backs as we accompany a nation on a harrowing escape from slavery. We will witness the rise and fall of magnificent kingdoms, the construction of glorious temples, and the profound sorrow of exile. This is a history that is simultaneously grand and intimate. It speaks of the fate of empires, but also of the quiet moments in a shepherd's field, the sorrow of a mother, and the wisdom of a prophet. The language of these texts, though ancient, is deeply human. It speaks of love, betrayal, hope, and despair, themes that resonate across the millennia. As we explore these narratives, we will pay close attention to the historical and archaeological context, understanding how the world of the ancient Near East shaped the very stories we are listening to. We will consider the lives of ordinary people, the challenges of agriculture in a semi-arid climate, the constant threat of famine and war, and the slow, inexorable march of time. Our journey is designed for gentle absorption. There is no need to concentrate or to remember every detail. Simply allow the words to wash over you, like a peaceful river flowing through the landscape of history. The rise of Babylon, the splendor of Solomon's temple, the humble beginnings of the Patriarchs. These images will unfold in your mind's eye without effort. This is a form of learning that invites rest and reflection, a way to connect with a foundational part of our shared cultural heritage as you drift into a peaceful slumber. Let the gentle cadence of this narrative guide you away from the worries of the day and into a quiet world of ancient wonders. Our adventure begins now, with the first words of creation itself. Our journey begins, as the text itself does, with a quiet and profound statement. In the beginning. The first book, Genesis, lays the foundation for everything that follows, a grand prologue to a story that spans millennia. We are transported back to a time before time, to a silent, unformed world described as a vast, watery void. From this swirling chaos, a divine presence begins to shape reality. We listen as light is separated from darkness. A firmament is placed between the waters above and the waters below, and dry land emerges from the seas. It is a methodical, purposeful act of creation, establishing a sense of order and structure in a world that was once without form. The imagery is vivid yet gentle. We imagine the land pushing up from the deep, vast oceans, receding to reveal fertile soil. The sun, moon, and stars are set in the heavens, not as gods themselves, as was common in many surrounding cultures, but as celestial markers to govern the rhythms of the day and night, the seasons, and the years. Then, the land is filled with life. Creatures of every kind, from the great beasts of the sea to the smallest insects. A rich tapestry of flora and fauna comes into being, an ecosystem brimming with diversity. It is in this newly ordered world that the creation of humanity takes place, a being made in the image of the divine, a figure intended to tend to this magnificent new world. We now enter a serene, almost dreamlike landscape, the Garden of Eden. The text paints a picture of an idyllic paradise, a place where rivers flow to water the ground, and two remarkable trees stand at its center, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is a place of harmony, where the first humans, Adam and Eve, live in a state of innocent simplicity. Their days are spent in quiet communion with the world around them, without the burdens of labor, shame, or sorrow. This garden is not merely a physical place, but a state of being, a perfect beginning that sets the stage for the human story to come. But this period of pure innocence is not to last. A figure of cunning, a serpent, enters the garden, questioning the divine command. He tempts Adam and Eve with the promise of wisdom, of being like gods themselves. The choice to eat from the forbidden tree marks a pivotal moment, a transition from innocence to self-awareness. It is a moment of profound change, introducing the world to the concepts of shame and responsibility. As they eat the fruit, they become aware of their nakedness, and a new kind of consciousness is born. The consequence of this act is their expulsion from the garden. They are sent out into a world of hardship, a place where the ground must be toiled, and life is no longer effortless. The lush sanctuary of Eden is now behind them, and the hard, complex reality of human existence begins. The narrative shifts from the idyllic to the challenging with the next generation. We observe the tale of two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain, a farmer, and Abel, a shepherd, both offer sacrifices. When Abel's offering is favored, Cain's jealousy and anger consume him. In a dark and sorrowful moment, he kills his brother. This is the first murder, a stark symbol of the violence and rivalry that can arise from within the human heart. The world outside Eden is already a more complicated, more sorrowful place. The narrative suggests a slow descent into moral chaos as generations pass. The land becomes filled with violence and wickedness, and the peaceful, harmonious vision of creation seems to be unraveling. This unraveling culminates in the story of the Great Flood. The world has grown so corrupted that the divine decides to wipe the slate clean and begin anew. But a righteous man named Noah finds favor. He is instructed to build a massive ark, a vessel to preserve life. We can imagine the enormous task, the building of this wooden ship under the quiet desert sun, the whispers of the coming deluge. The rain, when it finally comes, is described not as a storm, but as a total inundation, a complete return to the watery chaos from which the world was first formed. For 40 days and nights, the rain falls, and the ark floats alone on a vast and silent ocean that covers the entire earth. After the floodwaters recede, Noah and his family emerge from the ark onto a cleansed, quiet world. A dove carrying an olive leaf is the sign of new life, a symbol of hope. A rainbow appears in the clouds, a covenant or solemn promise that a flood of this magnitude will never again destroy the earth. It is a new beginning for humanity, a chance to rebuild and to live differently. The generations that follow spread out and multiply, but soon they too are driven by their own ambitions. We hear the tale of the Tower of Babel, a great ziggurat-like structure being built to reach the heavens, a monument to human pride and unity. This act of hubris is met with a scattering of languages, and humanity is dispersed across the globe, its shared identity fragmented. These foundational stories, from the tranquility of Eden to the chaos of Babel, serve as a profound explanation for the world's origins, the deep-seated flaws within humanity, and the enduring human quest for both connection and knowledge. They are a gentle opening to a much larger narrative, a quiet prelude to the history we are about to explore. Rest now as we prepare to drift forward in time toward the origins of a single nation. As we move forward in our journey, we leave behind the grand, sweeping narratives of creation and the early world and begin to focus on the story of a single family, a people in their infancy. The narrative shifts from the cosmic to the deeply personal, introducing us to a man named Abram, who will later be known as Abraham. We find him living in the city of Ur of the Chaldees, a vibrant and sophisticated urban center in ancient Mesopotamia, a land of ziggurats and complex legal codes. In this settled, advanced world, Abram receives a profound and simple command: to leave his home, his family, and his country to travel to a land that will be shown to him. This is the beginning of a long and deliberate movement, a journey away from the known and into the unknown. We can imagine the departure, the slow-moving caravan of family, servants, and livestock leaving the great city behind, They are becoming nomads, a lifestyle far removed from the settled life of Mesopotamia. They are now wanderers, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the availability of water and pasture for their flocks. Their days are defined by the breaking down and setting up of tents, the tending of sheep and goats, and the quiet vigilance required to survive in a semi-arid land. It is in this environment of constant movement that Abram receives the central promise that defines the entire Old Testament narrative, a covenant. This is a sacred agreement, a promise that he will be the father of a great nation, that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars, and that they will one day inherit a land of their own. Abraham's life becomes a testament to this promise. He is a man of faith, but also of deeply human struggles and doubts. We witness his hospitality, a cornerstone of nomadic culture, as he welcomes 3 mysterious visitors to his tent, unaware that they carry a divine message. We observe his negotiation with a divine presence over the fate of the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, a powerful moment that reveals his deep sense of justice. Most poignantly, we see his struggle to have a son with his wife Sarah, a promise that seems impossible to fulfill given their old age. But in a quiet, miraculous moment, their son Isaac is born, the child of the promise, the one who will carry the covenant forward. The torch of this fledgling nation is passed on from father to son, but not without complication. Isaac, a gentler and quieter figure than his father, carries on the nomadic tradition. He marries Rebekah, and they have 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, who are rivals from birth. The story of these 2 brothers is one of conflict, deception, and eventual reconciliation. Jacob, whose name means he who supplants, lives up to his name by tricking his brother out of his birthright and his blessing. Fleeing from Esau's anger, Jacob embarks on a long journey to a distant land, a journey of solitude and transformation. It is on this journey that he has a profound dream of a ladder reaching to heaven and later wrestles all night with a mysterious figure. It is during this struggle that his name is changed to Israel, meaning he who struggles with God. This new name is not just for him, but for his descendants, the very name of the nation that will one day arise. Jacob, now Israel, returns to his family and becomes the father of 12 sons, who will eventually form the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the foundation of the national identity, a family, a lineage, all stemming from one patriarch. Among these sons is Joseph, the second youngest, who is blessed with vivid dreams and is clearly favored by his father. The jealousy of his older brothers leads to a dark moment of betrayal. They sell him into slavery, and he is taken far away to the powerful and ancient kingdom of Egypt. This act of familial betrayal, however, becomes an unexpected pivot point for the entire narrative. Joseph's journey in Egypt is a fascinating contrast to the pastoral life of his family. We envision the sprawling city of Memphis or Thebes, with its towering monuments, bustling markets, and the life-giving flow of the Nile River. From a humble slave, Joseph rises through the ranks due to his wisdom and his ability to interpret dreams. He becomes the vizier, the second most powerful man in Egypt, managing the country's vast resources. When a great famine strikes the land, Joseph's brothers, now desperate for food, journey to Egypt. They do not recognize their long-lost sibling, but he recognizes them. The story culminates in a powerful moment of forgiveness and reconciliation. Joseph brings his entire family, including his aged father Jacob, to Egypt, settling them in the fertile land of Goshen. The nomadic life is now temporarily over, and the fledgling nation, a large extended family, finds itself in a new land, under the protection of a foreign power. The stage is now set, not for a peaceful settlement, but for a period of growth that will inevitably lead to a very different kind of journey. As we drift forward in time, we find the stage dramatically changed. The small family of Jacob has grown exponentially in the fertile land of Goshen. Generations have passed since Joseph's time, and the Israelites are no longer honored guests, but a vast foreign population. A new pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, rises to power and perceives this growing nation as a threat. The peaceful, settled life in Egypt gives way to hardship and oppression. The Israelites are forced into brutal slavery, building monumental cities and monuments under the harsh desert sun. The air is thick with the sounds of whips and the groans of forced labor. It is into this atmosphere of despair that a child is born, one whose life is marked by a miraculous beginning. His mother, to save him from a royal decree to kill all newborn Hebrew boys, places him in a basket and sets him afloat on the Nile River. He is discovered by the Pharaoh's daughter and raised as a prince within the very court that oppresses his people. We can picture the stark contrast. A young Hebrew boy named Moses, growing up in the opulent, sun-drenched palaces of Egypt, surrounded by monumental art and a sophisticated culture that worships many gods. He receives the finest education, is trained in military strategy, and is immersed in a world of immense power, completely unaware of his true heritage. However, a moment of deep empathy awakens his identity. As a young man, he witnesses an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave. In a surge of rage and solidarity with his people, he kills the overseer and buries him in the sand. This act of violence forces him to flee, abandoning his life of privilege. He escapes across the wilderness to the land of Midian, far from the grandeur and corruption of the Egyptian court. Here, his life is transformed again. He sheds his royal robes for the simple garments of a shepherd, spending decades in the quiet contemplation of the desert, tending his flocks under the vast starry sky. This is a long, deliberate period of solitude, a time of preparation for the immense task that lies ahead. His quiet life is shattered by a profound and unearthly sight, a bush that burns with fire but is not consumed. As he approaches, a voice emanates from the flames, revealing itself to be the God of his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In this moment, Moses is given his mission, to return to Egypt and demand the release of his people. He is told that the divine name is I am who I am, a name that signifies a presence that is eternal and beyond human comprehension. Moses, a stuttering, reluctant leader, is tasked with confronting the most powerful ruler on earth. He returns to Egypt and, with his brother Aaron, begins a series of confrontations with the Pharaoh. The narrative unfolds through a sequence of 10 plagues, each one a gradual unmooring of the Egyptian world. The plagues are not simply acts of destruction, but a methodical challenge to the core of Egyptian life and religion. The Nile, their lifeblood, turns to blood. The crops are destroyed by hail. The cattle die, and a suffocating darkness descends upon the land. These are not just physical events. They are a slow dismantling of a society built on the stability of its gods and its environment. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, is the one that finally breaks the Pharaoh's will. In a state of panicked urgency, the Pharaoh commands the Israelites to leave. The great event, known as the Exodus, begins. We can imagine the immense procession of people, men, women, and children, along with their livestock, leaving their homes in haste. It is a slow, powerful exodus of a nation in motion. Their path is blocked by the Red Sea, and with the Egyptian army in pursuit, the situation seems hopeless. But a powerful wind parts the waters, and the Israelites walk on dry ground between two immense walls of water, a moment of awe and profound liberation. Once they are safely across, the waters return, swallowing the Egyptian army, and they are truly free. Now, their journey begins anew, in the vast, arid expanse of the Sinai Peninsula. The desert is a harsh, unforgiving landscape of rock, sand, and wind. Survival is a daily struggle, and the people, though free, are often filled with fear and complaint. They murmur against Moses, longing for the familiar food of Egypt, but they are provided for in miraculous ways. Manna, a bread-like substance, falls from the sky, and quail appear in the evening, providing them with food. It is a period of dependence and learning. The climax of this journey is their arrival at Mount Sinai, a jagged peak shrouded in a pillar of smoke and fire. Here, Moses ascends the mountain, and the divine presence gives the people the law, the 10 Commandments, and a comprehensive set of legal and moral principles. This moment at Sinai is the true birth of the nation, as they transition from a collection of slaves into a people bound by a shared law and a sacred agreement. The detailed instructions for building a tabernacle, a portable sanctuary, ensure that the divine presence can travel with them. This long, arduous journey through the desert is a period of national formation, of being forged from a people of slavery into a people of the covenant. We now stand on the brink of a new era. The long 40-year journey through the wilderness has come to an end. The generation that left Egypt has passed away, and a new generation, born in the desert, now looks out upon the promised land of Canaan. Their leader Moses has died, but a new figure of strength and devotion has risen: Joshua, his loyal successor. From the eastern bank of the Jordan River, they gaze westward. The arid, stony landscape of the wilderness gives way to a lush, green vista of hills and valleys, a land described as flowing with milk and honey. It is a land of olive groves, vineyards, and rolling pastures, a place of immense promise and challenge. The first great act of this new chapter is the crossing of the Jordan River. Much like the miraculous parting of the Red Sea that marked their escape from Egypt, the waters of the Jordan cease to flow, piling up to create a dry path for the people to cross. This moment serves as a powerful symbol. The wilderness journey is definitively over, and the covenant promises are beginning to be fulfilled. This event also confirms Joshua's authority, just as the Red Sea crossing had confirmed Moses's. The people now follow their leader into their new home with a renewed sense of purpose and divine guidance. Their first major confrontation takes place at the fortified city of Jericho. We can imagine the imposing walls of the city, a formidable obstacle for a newly formed nation of former slaves. However, the strategy for taking the city is not a conventional military one. For 6 days, the priests and the people silently march around the city, a solemn, repetitive procession. It is a slow, methodical display of faith. The only sounds are the rhythmic footsteps and the occasional blare of the ceremonial trumpets. On the 7th day, the march is repeated 7 times, culminating in a mighty shout from the people. In that moment, the seemingly impenetrable walls of Jericho collapse, not through military might, but through an act of divine intervention. This event sets the tone for the entire conquest. It is a spiritual struggle as much as a physical one, a campaign that rests on the power of the covenant. However, the conquest was not a single swift military campaign as we might initially imagine. The scriptural account describes a more complex and gradual process. After Jericho, there are other battles, other campaigns, as Joshua leads the people against various Canaanite kings and city-states. But the settlement of the land was a long and arduous effort, often taking place over many years. The Israelites lived alongside the local populations for a time, sometimes in uneasy truce, sometimes in outright conflict. The task was not just to defeat the armies of the land, but to settle, to farm the fields, to build homes, and to slowly make the land their own. This was a transition from a nomadic identity to an agrarian one, a complete shift in their way of life and their relationship with the earth. The climax of Joshua's leadership is the grand division of the land. In a deliberate and careful process, the land of Canaan is allocated to the 12 tribes of Israel. We can envision a great gathering, perhaps at a central location like Shiloh, where the elders of the tribes come forward to receive their allotted portion of the new territory. The land is not given as a single, undivided whole, but is parceled out, creating distinct regions for each tribe: the rolling hills of Ephraim, the coastal plains of Asher, the mountainous regions of Judah, and the lush valleys of the Jordan. This division creates a new political and social structure. The people are no longer a unified mass wandering through the desert, but are now a collection of tribes, each with its own territory and its own challenges, bound together by a shared history and a common covenant. As his life draws to a close, Joshua gathers the people one last time. In a solemn farewell address, he reminds them of their history, of the great deeds of the divine on their behalf, and he presents them with a choice. He says, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." This is a profound moment of reflection, a challenge to a settled people not to forget their origins or the principles of their faith. He urges them to remain faithful to the covenant as they enjoy the fruits of a land they did not labor for and cities they did not build. The period of unified, centralized leadership under Moses and Joshua is drawing to an end. The nation, now a collection of tribes, is left to navigate the complexities of life in their new homeland. The long journey is over, but a new, quieter, and more fragmented era is about to begin. With the passing of Joshua, the era of unified leadership gives way to a new and tumultuous period. The tribes of Israel are now settled in their respective territories, but they lack a central government, a capital city, or a standing army. We can imagine the landscape of Canaan as a patchwork of 12 distinct regions, each with its own customs and concerns, often isolated from one another. Without a strong, unifying figure, the people begin to drift away from the covenant that defined their identity in the wilderness. The influence of the surrounding Canaanite cultures, with their rich agricultural festivals and their gods of fertility, begins to seep into the lives of the Israelites. This is a time of spiritual and political fragmentation, a period that is profoundly cyclical. This cycle, which repeats itself throughout the book of Judges, follows a clear pattern. First, the people fall into disobedience, worshiping the local gods of their neighbors, such as Baal and Asherah. They forget the history of their liberation from Egypt and the promises made at Sinai. This disobedience leads inevitably to oppression. They are no longer a unified force, and neighboring nations, the Philistines, the Midianites, the Ammonites, grow stronger and begin to harass and dominate the scattered tribes. The sound of invading armies, the loss of harvests, and the constant threat of violence becomes a part of their daily life. This oppression, in turn, leads to a cry for help. In their distress, the people remember their past and turn back to the divine. Finally, a leader is raised up, a judge, to deliver them. A judge was not a figure who presided over a courtroom, but a charismatic and often unlikely military leader, a political figure, and a spiritual guide. These were regional heroes, called upon in times of crisis to rally the tribes against their oppressors. Their power was not hereditary, nor was it based on a royal decree. It was a temporary, divinely appointed authority. The stories of these judges are filled with the texture of daily life in ancient Canaan, the rhythms of farming and herding, punctuated by sudden moments of conflict and deliverance. We can contemplate the story of Gideon, a man of profound humility and doubt. We find him threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding from the Midianite raiders who have been devastating the land. He is an ordinary farmer, yet he is called to lead. With his army, he is commanded to reduce his forces from thousands to just 300 men. This is a story of relying on faith rather than numbers, of understanding that victory does not come from human strength alone. The battle itself is a quiet, powerful image. In the dead of night, Gideon's small band surrounds the Midianite camp, each man holding a torch hidden inside a clay jar and a trumpet. The silence of the night is shattered by the simultaneous blast of 300 trumpets and the crash of 300 jars breaking, revealing the torches. The sound and light cause such panic in the Midianite camp that they turn on one another. The deliverance is not a bloody, dramatic war, but a strategic and symbolic act that underscores the judge's reliance on a higher power. The era also gives us the story of Samson, a figure whose immense strength is matched only by his deep personal flaws. His story is a series of individual acts of power and recklessness rather than a national campaign. We picture his long, uncut hair, the source of his strength, and his solitary battles against the Philistines. He is a judge whose power is personal and often self-serving. We hear of him tearing a lion apart with his bare hands, of breaking the ropes with which he is bound, and of his great tragic love for Delilah. His life is a cautionary tale about the dangers of a leader without moral discipline. His final, powerful act, bringing down the temple upon himself and his enemies, is a dramatic and sorrowful end to a turbulent life, a reflection of the chaos of the age. The book of Judges concludes not with a hero, but with a deep sense of moral decay and anarchy. The final chapters describe a society that has lost its moral compass, a world where every man did what was right in his own eyes. The isolated tribes, without a central authority, succumb to internal conflicts and profound acts of violence. The chaos and instability of this era naturally lead the people to desire a different kind of leadership. They begin to look at the powerful, centralized kingdoms of their neighbors, the well-organized Philistine city-states, the kingdoms of the Transjordan, and they long for a similar structure. They begin to yearn for a king, a single, unifying figure who can lead them in battle, bring them stability, and make them like all the other nations. This longing marks the end of a long, often difficult and fragmented period, and sets the stage for the next major transformation in the life of the nation. As the chaotic era of the Judges draws to a close, a new sense of purpose emerges from the widespread turmoil. The people, tired of the constant cycle of invasion and deliverance, voice a unified desire for change. They want a king. They long for a single visible leader who can unite the tribes and protect them from their enemies, just like all the other nations around them. This request marks a profound shift, a move from a loose confederation of tribes to a centralized state. The prophet Samuel, the last of the judges, reluctantly anoints the first king, a tall and handsome man named Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul is a leader chosen for his appearance and physical prowess, yet his reign becomes a tragic prelude to the golden age that will follow. Saul's time on the throne is marked by a constant struggle against the Philistines, the most formidable of Israel's enemies. His victories are often hard-won, and his leadership is plagued by an increasing sense of jealousy and paranoia. He struggles to obey the divine commands, and his reign becomes a somber tale of a man slowly losing his way. His story is a poignant beginning for the monarchy, revealing the profound human challenges inherent in holding a position of such power. It is in this turbulent period that a young shepherd, a humble boy from Bethlehem named David, emerges onto the scene. His famous confrontation with the giant Philistine warrior Goliath becomes a defining moment, not just for David, but for the entire nation. It is a victory of faith over brute force, a symbol of hope in a time of despair. David's anointing as a future king sets up a long and complex rivalry with the aging and increasingly unstable King Saul. David becomes a court musician, then a celebrated warrior, and eventually a fugitive, living as an outlaw and a leader of men in the wilderness. He is a brilliant strategist and a charismatic leader, but he is also a deeply human figure, full of passion, sorrow, and faith. Following Saul's death in battle, David is finally recognized as king, first of his own tribe of Judah, and then of all the tribes of Israel. He is the great unifier, the figure who brings the disparate tribes together under a single banner. One of David's first and most significant acts as king is the capture of the Jebusite city of Jerusalem. This city, located high in the central hill country, had long remained a neutral territory, a city belonging to no single tribe. David's choice of Jerusalem as his capital is a stroke of political genius. It is a new, central city that does not favor one tribe over another, and he renames it the City of David. He then embarks on a grand and ceremonious procession to bring the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest containing the stone tablets of the law, to his new capital. We can picture the scene. The Ark, carried by priests, is accompanied by a massive parade of people, singing and dancing with joy. This act transforms Jerusalem from a political capital into the spiritual heart of the nation, a place where the divine presence will reside. David's reign is a period of military expansion and consolidation. He defeats the Philistines and other surrounding nations, establishing a small but powerful empire, and he ushers in a period of relative peace and stability. This golden age of the monarchy reaches its peak under the reign of David's son, Solomon. Solomon inherits a kingdom that is secure and prosperous, and his time on the throne is known for its immense wealth, wisdom, and building projects. We hear of his vast trade network, his alliances with foreign kings like Hiram of Tyre, and the constant stream of silver and gold flowing into Jerusalem. The city is transformed from a bustling town into a magnificent capital of power and splendor. But Solomon's crowning achievement and the most enduring symbol of this era is the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. We can imagine the scale and detail of this project. Master craftsmen from foreign lands are brought in to build a structure of immense beauty and spiritual significance. The finest cedar is imported from the forests of Lebanon, and the walls and floors of the inner sanctuary are overlaid with gold. The temple is not just a building. It is a permanent home for the divine presence, a physical embodiment of the covenant. The Holy of Holies, a small and sacred room within the temple, houses the Ark of the Covenant. The completion of this temple marks the high point of the United Monarchy, a time when Israel is at its most unified, most prosperous, and most spiritually centered. However, even in this time of great splendor, the seeds of future discord are being sown. Solomon's extravagant lifestyle, his use of forced labor, and his many foreign wives who bring with them the worship of other gods begin to erode the very foundation of the kingdom. The Golden Age, for all its glory, contains the quiet beginnings of its own decay. The peace and unity that took generations to build will soon begin to unravel, setting the stage for a new and sorrowful chapter in the nation's history. The grand, peaceful era of Solomon's reign does not endure. Upon his death, the deep-seated resentments that his policies had created, the heavy taxes, the forced labor, the perceived idolatry, come to the surface. The people gather before his son and heir, Rehoboam, and ask for a lighter burden. It is a moment of profound consequence, a turning point that will forever alter the destiny of the nation. Rehoboam, advised by his young and arrogant counselors, dismisses their pleas with a tone of harsh arrogance. He declares that he will be even harder on them than his father was. This act of cold indifference shatters the delicate unity forged by King David. The 10 northern tribes representing the majority of the population rebel and secede, crying out, "What portion have we in David? To your tents, O Israel!" And so, the united monarchy, the golden age of a single powerful kingdom, comes to a sudden and sorrowful end. The nation splits into two. In the north, the 10 rebellious tribes form the Kingdom of Israel, a larger and more fertile land with a population that outnumbers the south. Their capital moves several times before finally settling in the city of Samaria. Their history is one of constant political turmoil and instability. Kings are assassinated, dynasties are overthrown, and a cycle of violence and unrest becomes the norm. The northern kings, in an effort to prevent their people from journeying to Jerusalem for worship, established new sanctuaries at Bethel and Dan, complete with golden calves. This move is a decisive break from the spiritual center of the covenant, and it defines the spiritual course of the northern kingdom, which is largely depicted as being unfaithful. In the south, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remain loyal to the lineage of David, forming the smaller kingdom of Judah. Their history is much more stable, centered around the capital of Jerusalem and the temple built by Solomon. The kings of Judah, for all their faults, are all descendants of David, giving the kingdom a sense of dynastic continuity that the north lacks. The temple and the city of Jerusalem become even more central to the identity of the people of Judah, as it is the last remaining symbol of the great united past. The two kingdoms, now neighbors and rivals, exist in an uneasy state of intermittent conflict and wary coexistence, a heartbreaking image of a family divided. It is in this period of division, instability, and spiritual decline that a new type of figure emerges onto the historical stage: the prophets. These are not merely foretellers of the future. The prophets are passionate, often solitary voices who act as the conscience of the nation. They are social critics, spiritual guides, and defiant messengers who stand before kings and commoners alike, calling them back to the original covenant. They remind the people of their history and warn them of the consequences of their unfaithfulness. We encounter figures like Elijah, a wild and powerful prophet from the northern kingdom, whose dramatic confrontations with King Ahab and his foreign queen, Jezebel, become legendary. We can imagine the scene on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenges the prophets of the pagan god Baal to a contest. It is a moment of immense tension, a clash of spiritual worldviews, which ends in a powerful demonstration of faith and a spiritual reawakening for the people who witness it. The prophet's message, however, is often not heeded, and the kingdoms continue their slow, downward trajectory. The political and spiritual weakness of the two kingdoms makes them vulnerable to the rising empires of the ancient Near East. In the 8th century BCE, the formidable Assyrian Empire begins its relentless campaign of expansion. The Assyrians are a brutal, highly organized military force, masters of siege warfare and terror tactics. In 722 BCE, after a long siege, they conquer the northern kingdom of Israel, taking its capital, Samaria. The Assyrians enact a policy of mass deportation, a cruel but effective strategy to crush the national identity of a conquered people. The people of Israel are scattered throughout the Assyrian Empire, and their land is repopulated with foreign settlers. In this sorrowful moment, the 10 northern tribes effectively vanish from history, becoming known as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The fall of Israel leaves the kingdom of Judah as the sole remaining remnant of David's once glorious empire. It is a small, isolated kingdom, now facing the colossal power of Assyria alone. The sight of their northern brethren being conquered and deported serves as a profound and terrifying warning. It inspires a period of temporary reform and a renewed focus on the Jerusalem temple. but the political and military pressures are immense, and a sense of anxiety and dread begins to settle over the final kingdom. The long period of division and decline has reached a new and final stage. The nation that was once united under Saul, David, and Solomon is now just a shadow of its former self, with its future hanging by a precarious thread. The isolated kingdom of Judah, the last remaining vestige of the united monarchy, now faces an even greater threat than its northern predecessor did. The ruthless and methodical Assyrian Empire has been eclipsed by the rising power of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, led by the formidable king Nebuchadnezzar II. The Babylonians are a force of nature, with a highly disciplined army and a deep desire to dominate the world. Judah, caught between this new power and its traditional rival, Egypt, finds itself in an impossible position. After a series of failed rebellions and political miscalculations, the inevitable comes to pass. Nebuchadnezzar turns his sights on Jerusalem. The final siege of the city is a long and agonizing process. We can imagine the city, once so glorious under Solomon, now starving, its people huddled behind its walls, listening to the relentless sounds of a vast army outside. After months of resistance, the walls are finally breached, and the city is overrun. The destruction that follows is a moment of profound sorrow and historical consequence. The city itself is largely leveled, its palaces and homes reduced to rubble. But the most devastating act of all is the destruction of Solomon's temple. The beautiful structure, the physical heart of the nation's faith, is systematically plundered and then burned to the ground. The Holy of Holies, the most sacred space on earth to the people, is now a smoldering ruin. The gold and precious artifacts are taken as spoil, and the people's sense of connection to their divine home is shattered. The era of magnificent, centralized worship comes to a brutal and sorrowful end. Following the destruction, a significant portion of the population, including the king, the priests, the scribes, and the skilled craftsmen, are forcibly deported. This is the Babylonian exile, a mass displacement of a people from their homeland. We can picture the long, mournful procession, the exiles leaving their desolate city behind and walking for months across the arid desert, their destination a vast, unfamiliar land. This is not a journey of hope, but a forced migration born of defeat and sorrow. They are no longer a kingdom with a capital and a king. They are a displaced people, living as exiles in a foreign land. Their new home, however, is a place of immense splendor and technological achievement. Babylon, the heart of the new empire, is a marvel of the ancient world. We can imagine the exiles arriving and seeing the magnificent Ishtar Gate, a brilliant structure of blue-glazed bricks decorated with depictions of lions and dragons. They would see the towering ziggurats, immense stepped pyramids that reached for the sky, and the fabled hanging gardens. The arid lands of Judah are a distant memory, replaced by the lush, fertile landscape of the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys. The exiles settle, but they do so with a heavy heart. By the rivers of Babylon, as the psalmist laments, hanging their harps upon the willow trees, unable to sing the songs of their homeland in a foreign land. Yet, out of this profound tragedy comes a period of immense spiritual transformation. With the temple gone, the people can no longer offer the sacrifices that were central to their faith. They are forced to find new ways to maintain their identity and their covenant. This is where the concept of the synagogue, a simple house of assembly for prayer and study, begins to take root. The emphasis of their faith shifts from the physical acts of sacrifice to the internal life of prayer, reflection, and, most importantly, the preservation and study of their sacred texts. The work of compiling and editing the stories, laws, and prophecies that we now know as the Old Testament begins in earnest during this time. The people realize that their identity is not tied to a physical building or a specific plot of land, but to their shared history, their laws, and their relationship with the divine. The exile, a period of immense loss, becomes a crucible in which a new, more resilient form of Judaism is forged. The prophets of this era, like Ezekiel, offer messages that are both sobering and full of hope. They remind the people that their exile is a consequence of their unfaithfulness, but they also promise a future restoration. Their messages prevent the people from completely losing hope in the face of what seems like a final end. The exile is a period of deep reflection, a quiet and sorrowful time where the nation reevaluates everything it once held dear. It is a time of waiting, of yearning for home, but also a time of spiritual consolidation and growth. The nation is no longer defined by its borders, but by its history and its words. The long, difficult night of exile will one day come to an end, paving the way for the slow and arduous work of rebuilding. The long night of exile in Babylon is finally coming to an end. The Babylonian Empire, once an unstoppable force, has itself been conquered by a new power, the rising Persian Empire. The new ruler, Cyrus the Great, institutes a revolutionary policy of cultural tolerance and ethnic restoration, a stark contrast to the brutal deportations of his predecessors. In the year 539 BCE, Cyrus issues a historic decree allowing the exiled people of Judah to return to their homeland and, most importantly, to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. It is a moment of overwhelming hope, a promise of a new dawn that seemed impossible for generations. The journey back to Judah is not a mass migration, but a gradual, slow return. We can imagine the first caravan of exiles, no longer a mournful procession of the defeated, but a hopeful group carrying the sacred vessels of the temple that Cyrus had returned to them. They walk the long road back from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, across the desert and into the hills of their ancestors. But when they arrive, the reality they face is not the glorious rebuilt kingdom they had perhaps dreamed of. The city of Jerusalem is a desolate, dusty ruin. The temple is nothing more than a scorched foundation. The land itself, though beautiful, is overgrown and sparsely populated by those who had remained behind. The joy of the return is tempered by the immense, daunting task of rebuilding. The first major undertaking is the reconstruction of the temple. The people, led by figures like Zerubbabel and the prophet Haggai, begin the hard work of clearing the rubble and laying the new foundation. The work is difficult, and they face opposition from the local populations and discouragement from their own poverty. When the foundation is finally laid, the scene is one of both immense joy and profound sorrow. The younger generation, who had only heard stories of the temple, shout with glee and celebration. But the older people, those who had seen the grandeur of Solomon's temple before its destruction, weep with a deep sense of loss. The new temple, which will come to be known as the Second Temple, is a much more modest structure, a poignant symbol of a broken past and an uncertain future. The rebuilding of the temple is only the beginning of a larger process of restoration. Decades later, a cupbearer in the Persian court named Nehemiah hears of the broken-down walls of his ancestral city and is given permission by the king to return and rebuild them. This is a different kind of rebuilding. The walls of a city are a symbol of its security, its independence, and its identity. We can picture the determined faces of the people, working together in shifts, with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other, constantly vigilant against their enemies who try to stop the work. The rebuilding of the walls is a testament to the community's resilience and its renewed sense of purpose. It is a physical embodiment of their commitment to their city and their shared heritage. But the most significant part of the reconstruction is not physical, but spiritual. Another figure, a scribe named Ezra, returns to Jerusalem with a copy of the law, the foundational texts that had been carefully preserved and edited during the years of exile. He gathers the people together in an open square and reads the law aloud, from dawn until noon. As they hear the words of their ancestors, the people are overcome with emotion, weeping for their past sins and their years of unfaithfulness. The reading of the law becomes a profound moment of national repentance and renewal. It is a declaration that their identity will no longer be defined by a king or an empire, but by the sacred words of the covenant. The focus of their faith is now not just on the temple, but on the communal study and observance of the law. The nation is reborn, not as a political power, but as a religious community, a people of the book. The return from exile and the subsequent rebuilding of the temple and city walls mark the final historical events chronicled in the Old Testament. The narrative we have followed, from the cosmic dawn of creation to the slow, hard work of restoration, has come to a close. The nation that was born in the desert rose to a golden age of power, fell into division and destruction, and endured the deep sorrow of exile, is now a small, self-governing province within a vast Persian empire. It is no longer an independent kingdom, but its spirit is more resilient than ever. The Old Testament, this vast library of books, concludes on a note of quiet anticipation. The people are home, the temple is rebuilt, and the covenant is renewed. But the grand promises of a glorious independent kingdom have not been fully realized. The stage is set for a long period of waiting and reflection, a time for the nation to live out its faith in a quiet, often difficult world. This remarkable journey through history, from the first whispers of creation to the final act of rebuilding a wall, is now complete. We have walked with the patriarchs under a desert sky, crossed the Red Sea with Moses, witnessed the rise of kings, and endured the sorrow of exile. Now, the stories are told, the history is written, and the people are at home. The long journey is over, and your journey into sleep can begin. Rest now, with the gentle weight of this ancient history settling peacefully in your mind.